All right, Jason Fitz is here. He's been filling in on the network for Max, so that's why he's not in his normal 3 spot today. But he was kind enough to jump off into the next hour, which is brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app today. All right, here we go. Jason Fitz is with us, and, of course, he, like all guests, appears via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And I guess, Jay, you woke up this morning, you might have had a thought, and now the entire NBA has been blown upside down and inside out.
It's funny. When I talked to Ramona Shelburne today on Max, you could hear the chaos in her voice. And Ramona's one of the best pros that we have at covering everything. And just hearing sort of the head spinning that's going on. Nobody expected not just the injury announcements, but then you couple that with the coaching changes. It's been a wild day in the NBA.
Yeah, the coaching changes is one thing. I mean, but right now on the court, we got Kawhi Leonard. It looked like an innocent little thing. It looks like it went from a knee sprain to an ACL sprain, and now that he might not be out, that opens up the West, and then all of a sudden Chris Paul might not be able to play at the start of the season, out indefinitely. The Jazz right now, the leaders in the clubhouse out West.
Yeah, the Jazz got to be right now looking at it and saying, hey, some years I always say it's better to be lucky than good, and the Jazz are very good. But, boy, is everything just sort of parting the right way for them where you can look at it and say, okay. And this feels like a year of the war of attrition. I mean, who's going to be the healthiest at the end of the year will decide who the NBA champion is, not who's going to be the best. I mean, this is one of those years where I'm not sure the best team is going to win the title, but certainly whoever can put the healthiest bodies on the floor at the end of the season will. And that's sort of, to me, it's interesting. It's less predictable. Like, we always bag on the NBA for being so easy to predict going into the season. This year is not that, so I think we should enjoy the ride.
All right, so what's a more impactful loss? The Clippers losing Kawhi or the Nets losing their 2 guys not being 100%? I mean, Harden, I don't know that he's going to be impactful the rest of the way. If he's doing what he did last night, you can't win a championship like that. Who knows when Kyrie's coming back?
Yeah, and I think the Nets, look, realistically, what KD did last night was so incredibly special. I don't think we can bank on that happening, not just through the rest of this series, but then through the rest of the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, we don't know when we're going to get any of the rest of the Nets stars back. So it's easy to say in my mind that that's the more debilitating one. But it isn't, only because I don't trust Paul George. Like, Paul George is not – there's no conversation now that puts Paul George in the Batman conversation. It's squarely is he even a good enough Robin? And that's how poorly he's played at times throughout the course of this playoff. And if there's a guy that you need to step up, it's going to be him. The point per game differential without Kawhi for the Clippers is about 10 points less. That's substantial. They don't have anywhere to make it up from. So the Clippers sold us this bill of, hey, we're not only star heavy, we're also depth heavy. And I'm not buying any of it now. I mean, Utah is a better team. They're going to win this series. I think they might have won either way, but Kawhi, you're going to miss so much on the defensive side of the court. I just don't see. I keep thinking about what Luka happened here. Like, think about how great Luka was, and then Kawhi said, nah, you're done. And he couldn't eat anymore, right? Like, who's going to do that for the Clippers? So Paul George cannot, in my mind, step up and get them through a series. So the Clippers are done.
Who's going to do that for them? Why wasn't Giannis doing it for the Bucks last night? I mean, what an epic performance, as you hinted at, from KD, and we can expand on that, but malpractice to defend him. He abused everybody last night. If you're Giannis and your coach doesn't say we're putting you on him, don't you step up and say, Coach, I have him.
Somebody has got to come in and instill a different fire in the Bucks. And that's where, I think Coach Bud has made some really curious decisions along the way over the last couple of years, and we keep giving him benefit of the doubt. But to what you just said right there, there's a place and a time where I want my star to stand up and say, up yours. I'm doing what needs to happen for this team right now. And for Giannis not to do that shows that somebody's got to find that fire in Giannis. Like, there's a lovability to him. But you looked at KD, and like, it's become a meme already, but the way his face looked throughout the course of that game, he had such anger, playing with pure anger, but it was controlled in such an incredible way. And the more PJ Tucker got under his skin, the more it was like 80s wrestling. He's like, all right, slap me in the face. I'm going to keep coming back for more. My arm will not stay down. And that's what we saw from KD last night. I got to see at least a tenth of that from Giannis before I can believe that Giannis can be in that same league. KD was uncoverable and was also just emotional in every right way.
Yeah. Now, at any point, are you watching Giannis and almost feeling bad for him. I mean, the fact that it's like he doesn't have another gear offensively. Here's this guy who's the MVP, and Durant's kind of like, yeah, okay, you're the MVP, you do one thing. I mean, we deal with it here with Ben Simmons, but Simmons has, I always say, the Bucks need Giannis to score. The Sixers don't need Ben Simmons to score. They have Joel Embiid. They have Tobias Harris. They have two guys that make three. If Giannis doesn't score, the Bucks ain't winning. And I almost felt bad for him last night, the way that they're just putting the wall up and saying, go ahead, do what you want. He scores 32 points, but at the end of the day, the limitations, I think, are too much for Giannis. Without that roster configuration is not going to do it for him.
Well, to your point, and I'll go back to Batman and Robin. We heard the Scottie Pippen conversations about Giannis that people got really fired up about. Like, he's a better better Pippen than Jordan. Well, when you look at Simmons, whatever his limitations are can be masked by the other superstar that they have. There is a spot where Giannis was expected to be all the superstar you would need. And as much as I'll put part of it on Coach Bud for not having the fire or the right game plan, I'll put part of it on the teammates that aren't around him that need to be better. But also, Giannis is the one that doesn't have a great mid-range shot. We all know that. Giannis is the one that doesn't shoot well from the line. We all know that. And there's a concept from the greats. And I'm not saying this is easy, but what do we see from the greats? Constant evolution towards what your weakness is. And we can look at Kobe. You can look at, other than Shaq, we can look at most of the greats and say, hey, where did they improve their game? Well, I'm looking at Giannis right now asking that same question because he needs to take a massive leap as an individual on the court to be the full version of Giannis we thought he could be. Like, if he just wants to be a top 5 player in the NBA for the rest of his life, great, he's there. That's good. If he wants to be in the same breath as the KDs, the LeBrons, the Michaels at some point in his career, he's got to take a huge leap forward. And that's a personal thing that has to happen that we're not seeing happen from him at all.
Yeah, and that's where it's like he's a 2-time MVP, but is he good enough to be the best player on the team that wins a championship? And I think you're kind of sadly starting to reevaluate that. You look like, hey, you can't – like, it's funny, Jay. Here, it's 50-50. Get rid of Simmons. He stinks. Can't win with them. Got to trade him. I don't know why people like this guy. The other half appreciates him. Got to keep him. Don't win unless you have what he brings to the table. Does anybody ever say – they got to trade Giannis Antetokounmpo? You never hear that, but at what point does that start to creep in that you can't win if he's your best?
1 year. I think they got one more year before everybody's going to start saying, does Giannis want out or do they want out? And they'll have to have a real conversation with themselves about what they can do because what do you see? I mean, Milwaukee's a great indication, right? When you look at the way the roster is built, it's not easy to find 1A. If you think you have one, you mentioned Philly, so many people are, well, Simmons isn't good enough at this, and this. How many teams would kill for a Simmons? You can find one guy and then you're lucky. Can you find two guys that you think you can build around? Now, the 76ers have more than that. Now, I think that Tobias Harris, by the way, is an under-talked about portion of why I think Philly can be very good. But if you look at Milwaukee, they've tried to do that. They've tried to find the right other guys. It just hasn't worked. So now you have a star that hasn't taken a leap forward. You have a coach that doesn't seem to know what he's doing half the time. And then you have a bunch of other people on the roster that just aren't good enough. That's how you end up being Milwaukee, who right now looks like they're going to be the second or third best team in the East for the next 5 years.
Well, and
what good is that?
Yeah, right. They added this roster. They got Drew Holiday. They already had Middleton. So it's like, okay, they have their little big three version, and you have the MVP of the league. The problem, they shot 40% from three last night and still couldn't beat a team that was playing 4-on-5 the whole night. And it's like, the problem was, yeah, you made 40%, but in the end, who was calling the game last night? They said it. Well, late in games, they got to run through Middleton. You ain't winning if you got to run through Middleton.
And late in games is such a key part of that conversation. We watched the Hawks melt down, right, early on in the series where they couldn't even get the ball in bounds and they hang on to win a game early on. I can look at that and say, okay, the Hawks are a young team. We understand that certain moments are going to get them. And that I can have some tip of the hat and say, hey, that's a learning spot. The Bucks are way past that. And you watch the fourth quarter of that game. If anybody watching knew it was inevitable, Milwaukee was losing that game because when it came down to it, every possession felt choked for Milwaukee. Every possession felt tight. And then what did they do on the other end? KD just went in, elevated against whoever they were putting on him, and shot lights out. It was an efficient and also magical game from KD. That was the difference in this. You saw one guy that was like, fine, put my back up against the wall and I will win. And you saw another guy that I can't get the image out of my head, fair or not, of 25, 30 seconds left in the game. Giannis gets thrown the ball in the easiest spot for him to catch it, down by 4, needs to get that bucket, and he drops the ball. Like, that's the difference. KD took advantage of every opportunity, and Giannis, when they needed him the most, shrunk. And that's going to be stuck in everybody's head.
Right. And, we talk about here in Philly, Ben Simmons, they don't need him to be in that spot. They have Joel Embiid. They can go to Tobias Harris. The Bucks need Giannis in that spot, and he just doesn't have it. It's just it's kind of sad. The way they defend him late in that game, they're just way off of him. That's going to be an interesting story. What happens with that marriage? Budenholzer is probably going to be gone, and if they fail again, at what point do they say, okay, we've tried a different coach, now we got to decide, is it the player that we got to move on from? So that one is going to be huge because he's in a market, too, by the way, that, he would probably say, hey, I don't mind if you get me out of here. He has been cool enough, I guess, to say, I'm going to stay here. So that story to me is crazy. Can Trae Young be the best player on a team that wins a title? Maybe not this year, at some point.
Yes, as long as you put some thickness around him. Like, he's just, and what I mean by that, and you guys know this, like, he's just a little guy. Like, there's just a spot where he can shoot from anywhere. He can be a bit of an agitator, but man, there's going to be a spot where they need somebody with enough size. If they really want to beat that team year in and year out, they need the pick and roll guy. They need somebody with some size that can be a disruptor. I think Trae Young, though, yes, absolutely. And it's rare to look at a trade. Like, we can look back now at the trade for Trae Young, Luka Doncic in the draft and say, maybe everybody won in that. Like, you've got 2 young players that are absolutely the types of guys that can win championships and be the guy in that championship. I think Trae has that opportunity to truly be the dynamic face of the league in 10 years.
We have possibly no Chris Paul for the start of this, and that would be disappointing for that Phoenix team, which right now, if Chris Paul's playing, are they the best team?
Yes. If Chris Paul's playing, they are the best team. And by the way, credit to just we were talking about roster construction. You got this young team, and you got all these young pieces, and you're looking around saying, how do we bridge this? How do we get this to the next level? And you suddenly bring in Chris Paul and the personal relationship he has with his coach, and all of a sudden that just bond comes together, and Chris Paul becomes a different human being. And now they get the best out of Chris Paul combined with the young roster that was ready to explode. Phoenix deserves a lot of credit for the way they built that roster and for what they've done. And frankly, I think we're going to end up, when we get this Phoenix-Utah series, it is going to be a dynamic, electric, incredible series to watch. And we're going to love watching Donovan Mitchell go against all of that, too. Like, the young stars on display in the West are going to be absolutely great to watch.
Yeah, last one. I guess Van Gundy, they part ways. Brooks, they part ways. Everyone's part ways. Let me tell you, when I'm done here, I will be fired. They will have to fire me, or I will tell them I'm leaving. We are not part ways. I will be fired, or I will tell them I'm out of here. All this part ways stuff. But Van Gundy, that job, I would imagine coaches are going to line up for that thing.
Yeah, I mean, coaches have to be looking at it and saying, my only concern is, why is he gone so fast? I know it underachieved, and they have a lot of talent there. But the only thing that I'd say is that Zion's now gone through 2 coaches as a pro, right? And so are the expectations in New Orleans so huge that you got to go in and do it now? And the other thing, too, to keep in mind, if I'm a coach, I am going to at least casually step back and see if I can see what happens in this Milwaukee series. Because to me, if they lose this series the next day, Budenholzer's out. And so the question is, do you think you can get the most out of Giannis? Because in my mind, there is still proof of concept around who Giannis can be that makes that such an appealing job. And there's patience. Milwaukee has shown tremendous patience in the way they've done everything. But that New Orleans job is absolutely dynamite, especially in my mind. You look for somebody that might want to step out of college ranks, come up and work with a young team and really be a dynamic presence.
At Jason Fitz, he's filling in for Kellerman this week on the Max Kellerman Show. So he was kind enough to join us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.